Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm sorry, I can't turn to my right at the moment. My back is taped up with blue tape because my neck is messed up. So please excuse me if I don't look round at you. Over here, it's nothing offensive. I don't find anything offensive about people on the right. I just can't turn my head tonight. I'm going to focus on benefits of women in leadership. And this is the boring and statistical part of the night. As Valdetta, as press edge, we've done a lot of work on statistics, and there's, over the last 10 years, a lot of statistical data has become available, and it's consistent, it's widespread and reliable, and it proves that involving women in leadership, that having gender balance in leadership organisations gives you much more effective management, much more effective outcomes for organisations and for society. It's not just a feeling, it's hard statistical evidence that this is correct. It comes from a number of sectors, particularly the corporate sector and particularly the public sector in terms of state departments. The situation in Kosovo is not all that great. Okay, we have a quota for representatives, so we have 30% representation. And what's good is that quota is working. That each election we've had an increasing number of women who don't need the quota to be elected, and that's the whole point of having a quota, so you don't need it in the end, to have this as a step up. So it's working here. Executive-wise, nowhere near as good. 2 out of 19 ministers. Compares really badly with neighbours in Albania. Sorry, 2 out of 21. 6 out of 19 in Albania. It's not as bad as some countries. There's 8 countries in the world without any woman in the ministry. On the other hand, there's 30 countries in the world with over 30% of their ministries being women. So Kosovo's a long way behind good practice in terms of inclusion in executive government. But let us talk about electoral staff, which we've done a fair bit of research on. Yes, it's going up. 20% of all staff at the last election in EMBs at various levels were women. But in leadership positions, that was way, way lower. In the CEC, 1 woman, 9%. In MECs, 13% of members. Municipal election officers, 11% are women. PSC chairs in the polling stations, again, 13%. Now these figures are way, way lower than any other country in this part of the world. Any other country in the Balkans, in Central and Eastern Europe, in the former Soviet Union. Kosovo is way down the bottom of the list for women's participation in electoral administration. I don't know why. The factors in other countries are similar. Parties nominate the members, as here. So it's not a function of party. They're temporary commissions. It's not a function of the permanence or temporariness of the commission. It's more like an attitude problem, and we'll come to that a little bit later. So what's Kosovo missing out on in all this? And it's missing out on a lot. It's missing out on a chance for much more effective development in the country. There's a couple of key research publications. One that comes out regularly from Credit Suisse in Switzerland that surveys about 3,000 companies worldwide every 2 years. And its conclusions are really very, very clear. The higher the proportion of women in top management, the better the organisation's performance. Proven by the statistics. No question about it whatsoever. When you look at different measures, say in their last report they looked at the 6 years to 2014, and they showed that large companies, those with gender diverse top management, performed or outperformed those with male management by 26%. Their return on investment was 26% higher with a gender diverse board. When they look at company performance over the last 5 years, you can see that the more women you have, the better the company performs with their top management. Those companies with 25% women were giving a 24% annualised return on capital. Those companies with over 50% women in top management were giving over 29% return on capital. So the more women that these organisations have in top management, the better they perform, the more effectively they work, the better decisions are being made. One of the things that came out of this is that companies with women in top leadership positions analyse risk much better, They critically question strategic decisions. They are much better in reining in rogue elements in management and getting consensus and getting a more collective path towards the good of the organisation. It's not just feeling, it's proven by performance statistics. Most people don't want to know it though, particularly most males, because it threatens their power. But the evidence is there, it's been there for the last 10 years. When we go back to, say, stuff that was done in 2004 by Catalyst in the US, looking at the Fortune 500 top companies. And they looked at 5 industry sectors. They looked at 335 of these top 500 companies overall. And those with gender diverse top management had a 35% higher rate of return on investment than those with male dominated. That's what performance is about. How do you generate better, more effective performance? In a corporate environment, your investment produces more. In a public sector environment, your investment in people produces more. And it's a similar analogy. In a political environment, your investment in policy produces more and is more effective in that way. It's true in public administration as well. In 2012, there was a big survey done of 33 American departments, including USAID, including the Federal Election Commission there, so they were included in this. And they looked at 4 particular elements of performance in public sector administration. And these 4 things were leadership and knowledge management, results-oriented performance culture, talent management and job satisfaction. And on all of these elements, the organisations in the US public sector that were led by women performed significantly better than those that were led by men. That's no accident. No accident at all. But why? Why is this happening? When people have looked at differences in management style, and people like at the Carnegie Mellon School of Business Administration done significant research on this, they found that the presence of gender diversity is one of the key factors in influencing collective intelligence. Not individual ability, but the collective ability of a group to be able to make effective decisions. They need enablers and ablers in that. And a gender diverse group tends to create better balance of this. They found that women in both public sector and corporate sector, in their decision making, they tend to take a much broader view than men of the impact of policies, to include both redistributive functions like social justice, I suppose, and distributive functions like your procedural efficiency, and get a better balance in the group in decision making. Without that gender balance, you tend to go one way or the other and focus on procedure rather than focus on outcome. That's been the experience. So why aren't there more women taking leadership roles in Kosovo, in election institutions, in political parties? Well, one clue is possibly in this Credit Suisse report, which says that 70% of the male executives that they spoke to did not know there had been any research on the effectiveness of women in management, and when they were told about it, didn't believe it and wanted to ignore it. So if that's the situation, it makes it very, very difficult for attitudes to be able to change when clear evidence is presented and no one wants to recognise it. Why don't they want to recognise it? Because it impacts on the power that they have within organisations. It's a challenge. This is one of the critical things, it's been one of the critical things in feminist work over the last 40, 50 years, is how to impact this change in power. How to affect the change so there's a more even balance in power relationships. In Kosovo, we've done a lot of focus groups recently and meetings at municipal level with political party leaders. And trying to find reasons for why so few women, or relatively few women, are involved in election administration. And these meetings came out with a list of 37 barriers to why women couldn't be election administrators in the view of political party leaders. Now, a lot of these were all these stupid, illogical stereotypes you're going to get in any group of male politicians. You know, women are not strong enough. Can't carry ballot boxes. Well, no, they carry a kid round all day, but the ballot box is far too heavy. They can't work long hours. Well, yeah, well, when their babies are young, they're up all night sort of looking after them, but they can't possibly work for 12 hours in a polling station. This is absolutely beyond them. They're not qualified. Well, how come the majority of students at Pristina University are women if there aren't qualified women around? They're too emotional. Well, yeah, okay. Too fearful. Politics is for men only. They need muscle in a political situation. And these are the sort of illogical things that were coming out. There were also some more difficult ones to deal with as barriers. Women were saying there was probably a possible fear of being associated with a losing party. It could impact on their employment prospects or their relationships within their local community if they're on the wrong side or seen as being on the wrong side. They're too incorruptible. You can't have women in polling stations because they can't be manipulated. This is dreadful. Why would we want them there? They don't do as we tell them to do. And then basically parties not necessarily interested in changing. The local male power structures like things just as they are. Thank you very much. One thing that did come through, very much undercurrent, hardly mentioned as is often the case, was an indication of potential, there may be some sexually difficult or harassment, difficult situations in this atmosphere. Just from some of the comments that were made both around these discussions. Not any direct evidence, but when people say, oh, we treat women well in this municipality, if a woman's on a bus coming in here, there'll be at least 10 guys will ask her out on the way in. You begin to wonder how comfortable a situation it is for women working in a polling station. The strong impression from these meetings is that nothing's going to change unless it's forced, unless there's either a big carrot or a stick. Certainly the professional election administrators, when we met with the municipal election officers, quite firmly believed that it was going to take a quota of some sort to change parties' behaviour in terms of having more women in election administration. And we have a law on gender equality, but the problem is sanctions for that are really difficult. What do you do? In some countries they enforce such things by having performance bonuses for the organisational heads, and they lose those bonuses if they don't meet targets, like having 40% women within their staff. But that needs a totally different structure of pay to make that effective. One other way to look at it would be, and this happens also in other countries, is organisations have to publish annually a list by position of the numbers of women and numbers of men in their organisation. And then, of course, the media have to take some sort of interest in this to make sure that it's publicised and people know who are the worst performing parts, be it political parties nominating staff or be it other departments of state. Just one last quick point. There's been a lot of emphasis in Kosovo, as in many countries, on getting women into parliament. What is even, well, I won't say more important, what is just as critical is making sure that women have leading positions in party administrative structures. They don't just need to be the mouthpieces, they need to be the policy makers. And it's pretty useless dumping them off in the corner in a women's wing and saying, thank you very much, we'll listen to you once a year or once a month. They have to be part of top administration. And it's good to see that there are organisations like our friends at NDI here now that are working on this. But it is critical that women have input into political party policy. That means that they can have input onto a lot of things that help resourcing and make things a lot easier for society as a whole. There are countries that have introduced gender impact statements for all legislation. Countries like Canada, where all departments have to issue a gender impact statement of every policy that they implement, so that people can see how it affects women. Countries, well, numbers of countries, Austria, Germany, most of the Nordic countries that have gender responsive budgeting. And you're not going to get this unless you have women in policy positions, in political parties. Anyway, I've spoken enough. But the sad thing is that you look at this, Kosovo could be performing possibly 50% better if it had a gender balance in its leadership, right through. And that's from the data from public sector and from corporates internationally. There's that much that could be grown just with a flick of the finger by changing and improving the gender balance in institutions here. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.